Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was getting a message through on my phone, so it was making a bit of noise. Welcome back to Live and Uncut workshop number 18. We're going to be talking about HDR photography today, and hoping it's be something of interest which you may want to try for yourself. This is the first time I've done a broadcast using Safari instead of Chrome, and I'm hoping that on that basis you'll be able to see my full layout of Lightroom when I go to show you just a very, very quick way of doing a little cheat, so to speak, in Lightroom to create an HDR image. Excuse me. But first of all, let's do what we always do, and we go and check out what's been posted up on our Flickr site. Just bear with me 1 second while I get the page up. And there's been just a few images added this week, very interesting images which I want to talk about. But what I want to mention to you more than anything else, is something which I've come across, is that there's some comments being made on the discussion page of Flickr, and I really want to ask you guys to start adding discussion points on there. You may have an idea for the show, and I'm more than happy to hear what you have to say, and see if we can get something going along those lines. So let's just have a quick look at this, because there's an important email that was not an email, a message rather, by Thorpe, where it'd be worthwhile you going on to read this actually, where he describes the his comment based on my comments about his image with the knife, if you remember, with the what appeared to be blood smeared rather over the music sheet, and the knife and the glass and the cork. And I made a comment that it looked out of focus. And thank you for your comment here, Thorpe. I really appreciate you coming back and giving me an idea. I noticed I've been calling him Thorpe. He signs it James, so apologies for that. But anyway, he gives a good explanation of probably what has happened and where he's been focusing on. And that's the sort of feedback that I like to read, comments that you want to make on something which I've said. And I really don't mind. If you don't agree with what I've said, please post it up. Because I learn by doing these tutorials for you, as much as I hope you learn from something which I'm saying. The other point which I wanted to mention was, you can see on this particular discussion page, I've given you a reference to a Facebook page that I've created called Photography Live and Uncut. There's a number after it. You got the link there in the post, and I'd be happy for anyone to add their comments on my page. Again, comment on the workshop, an idea you may have, or if you want some help, why not just post it straight on? Because if it's posted on that particular page or in this discussion, you'll get other people making their comments, and it's all worthwhile comments which are coming in. So let's have a look at the images which have been posted. Just want to check if we can. No, I can't see that. Let's go back to that. So I'm really hoping that you're seeing these images. If someone is live, watching me live, perhaps they'd like to ping me a Facebook message, please. If you can, I've got a Facebook message open up on my iPhone. So if you could ping me through that, that would be great. There's one image which needs to make some comment made by Atzi, who published this image after we did the assignment discussion. I just want to say, actually, this is fantastic. I thought it was a really well thought out image. The fork reflected in the spoon, neatly balanced above, beautiful focus on the fork here, and the spoon reflection giving you another artistic type look to this setup that you've created. A very good still life. You've caught the highlights off the fork spears here, which is lovely. And I really did like this image. It was a shame it wasn't in originally. It's a great abstract work. John Ilko's made a comment. Thanks for making that comment, John. But you can see others have made comments on this, which is great. 28 favorites. Yeah, well deserved. Actually, great image. And yeah, I'm really pleased that everyone that I've read enjoyed the assignment. Right. So the first image for this new set is by Stephen Green. Someone's made exactly the same comment that I was thinking when I first saw it. It does look like a shark at the bottom of the sea. It's a grab shot. Stephen's highlighted that in his comment when he's been doing some landscape work, and it's just this sort of thing which happens, and you take the image, you look at it later, you do a little bit of enhancement, and you get a lovely image of this nature. I really like it. Let's look at the EXIF data, 0.3 of a second, f11 on a 250mm lens at ISO of 100, and you've done a great job there, Stephen. Really like it. I like the vignette as well, which is something which I do go on about a bit. I know, but because of the slow shutter speed, you've got this almost double exposure effect here, created by the plane and the swerving lights. It's a good image. Maybe you've done a double exposure there as well. I don't know. It only says it's blurred. So yeah, but a great image. Really enjoy it. Next one. Yes, his and hers bikes, well spotted by said wife. Congratulations, Stephen. You've got a very observant wife. Well done. My wife's a little bit like this as well. She sees an image which you basically walk past. But yes, his and hers bikes. I like it. Turl Street, everything there. It's a typical street shot where you've spotted something out of the ordinary. Blue for boys, pink for girls, says James or Thorpe. And yes, well spotted image, nicely balanced. Nice balance here on this side and on that side. You're not really clipping anything. You've got it nice and square on the window. Another good important point. You've got good reflection in the window, and all the highlights are there. Nothing's blown out, and you've got some good work in the shadows down the bottom here. So it's a nice, pleasing image of a street shot there. Well done. Great abstract shot here by Thorpe, James. I don't know what to call you now. Yeah, I like looking up at buildings and catching that angle, which is the angles, and you've got this slap bang in the middle, and it works for that reason. It's a pure abstract shot, beautiful angle. I like the depth here. Some would say it's a little too narrow. No, I like that because it's all about this angle of the building, and everything is in sharp focus. We can blow in and out of that. A good vignette around to enhance the blue. 3 favorites. I think you should have more than that, to be honest with you. And using the Nikon F3. What a great camera that is. 24mm with the Velvia, Fuji Velvia film. Lovely shot. Love the blue and this abstract complementary color against the blue of the building. A nice shot. And this one, again, by Thorpe, looking up, or James, looking up. You're going to have to send me a message, Thorpe. What do I call you, Thorpe or James? And then I'll know what to say. Yeah, this has been given a bit of a warming treatment by the looks of things in the post-processing, I'm assuming, because Kodak Portrait 800, yeah, unless... No, I'm going to stick to my guns. You've probably done a little bit of work here in the Lightroom, or which I've no objection to, of course. That's how we do all our editing these days. A little bit of warming to it to show either maybe a setting sun, and love the colors. Oh, early morning sunrise. Interesting. Humans in the entire... Yeah, it's 4:30 in the morning. So yeah, the early morning sun and the late night sun does play tricks with the photography, and especially with film photography. Yeah, would you mind giving me a little message on that? Because I'd like to know if you did do any processing in Lightroom there. To me, it looks as though there has been, because of this color of the sky, but I'm going to leave it at that. I really like the image though. I love it. And again, this is a great example of looking up. 2 great examples which James Stroke Thorpe has sent us there. So that's Flickr this week. Not very many images posted, but well worth having a look at. And thanks for sending those in to me. So HDR is the subject this week. And why HDR? First of all, it's going to be a repeat book. It's the book by Trey Ratcliff, which I showed you earlier on. But there is another one which you may want to search out on, which you can buy the printed version, or you can buy the iPad version by RC Concepcion. I haven't been able to find it in preparation for this show, but if you search RC Concepcion for his website about RC, you'll see some of his images. He's done a fantastic book, which I've got on iPad, all about HDR. So the question is, why make an HDR image? Well, HDR effectively does what a camera can't do. A lot of people will say to you, the best is to get as much as you can in camera, and that's quite correct. But when you make an exposure, you're either exposing for the lighter area or for the darker area to get your the interest out of the subject. But what about if you were able to expose your image to work for the lighter area and for the shadow area? And this is where HDR, high dynamic range, comes to help us. And there's several programs out there which you can get, which are all free. Photomatics is one. There is a premium version, I believe, of Photomatics. There is the HDR effects through the Nick collection, which is free through Google now. And then there is another one which I'm particularly fond of, which is called Aurora, which is a purchased version through the Trey Ratcliff website, where he's done a lot of work developing this program and this tool. What does HDR do? It basically increases the detail in the highlights and the shadows at the same time. Two ways of doing this. In the previously, before these programs got so dynamic in their own personal range, a photographer would take 3 or maybe 5 or maybe even sometimes 7 bracketed images of different exposures, working from, we'll say for argument's sake, -2 through to +2. So you'd have -2, -1, 0, +1, +2, 5 images, and then basically registering those 5 images and then downloading them into the program. The program would literally squash them together, match the you instruct it to match the if the camera has moved, so it's all on the same sort of, it's matching everything through that image, and then it would create the image from that. Now, when this first came out, people went bananas and berserk about it, to be quite honest with you. They did it to the nth degree, and you got some very, very garish, harsh type work being created, much to the point where in competition judges didn't like it. They thought it was overdone, it was spoiling photography, and so on and so forth. Slowly as time has gone by, and this is only really over the last 5 years, slowly as time has gone by, the photographer has realized to sort of dampen that down a little bit and get the more subtlety into their image making. Now, with the programs which are offered from HDR Effects, Aurora, and Photomatics, you can actual fact register how much HDR effect and texture that you want to bring into your image. Now, I'm not going to go into those details about that today. Maybe we can look at that at another time, because really it is down to the own personal preference of the user and what they want to show. But what I would suggest to you is don't overdo it. It can get very, as I said earlier on, very garish and very sharp and harsh, and it becomes almost an over painterly look to your image. Now, of course, if that's what you're looking for, then go for it. But personally, I feel that the dampen those levels down to create a more subtle and a more pleasing element to your images is more worthwhile. Now, Trey Ratcliff in particular is a huge exponent of HDR, and his image that he created of a fireworks display was shown in the Smithsonian University Museum, in the States. It's one of the very few photographs of HDR which is shown. It's quite a famous photograph of the rocket going into the firework going into the sky. Now, Trey Ratcliff wrote the book and has been very, very helpful in creating a lot of tutorials on his website, which is called Stuck in Customs. And I would suggest going onto that site and finding some of his tutorials, because he really does go into it in a very, very detailed way. Another person you might want to consider looking at is Serge Ramelli. Serge is from Paris, very sort of regular YouTube tutorial master, really, for want of description, and he goes through the different phases of creating HDR or layered photography as well, which he does bring into his work using the high dynamic range. But one thing both of them do is that they use the layer. Now, I'll explain to you what that is before I give you some examples of using Lightroom myself. What they do is they create the HDR version. They then take that HDR version, which has been created by, we'll say, 3, 5, or 7 images, and flatten it down. They've done their highlights and their shadows and added certain aspects to it. Then they transport that into Photoshop with the original zeroed exposure, the one which is slap bang in the middle. They then layer those two and then decide what aspects they want to bring out from the original image into the HDR image. So they're doing a second sandwich of the two images, of course, making sure that they both line up. That's the very important aspect of doing that. But this can all be done in Photoshop. So that is where the subtlety of HDR work comes into play, and where you find that the exponents of HDR have realized that the garish, sharp, over-sharpened, and over-painterly type look to the image can be dampened down by using this process. So really take your time, if you can, to check these guys out. Trey Ratcliff, stuckincustoms.com, and Serge Ramelli. Serge Ramelli is found quite easily on the website and his YouTube channel, which is very, very good and very, very detailed. So from my aspect, let's first of all go and have a look at some exponents of this work. The guys that, in my opinion, have really taken HDR photography to the fore. There's another photographer called Rick Sammon. You may be aware of Rick Sammon's work. Rick, fantastic photographer, great nature, wildlife photographer, but does love doing HDR. And here is an example. He's taken the photograph. He's probably taken 3, maybe 5 images here. So he's exposing for outside and he's exposing for inside the car, and he gets this great depth of color, high dynamic range for his photograph. And then, of course, he does some work in Lightroom. This is Rick Sammon we're looking at here. There's another one for Rick Sammon. HDR image, cars pulled up in front of this motel or a diner, and he's taken the image. I believe, in actual fact, his wife drove that car up in front of the diner several times until he got the exact image he wanted. And again, he's gone to the HDR. We know it's HDR because look at it's evening, the lights are on, the neon lights are on, and the sky is a very dark blue. It's not black. And the only way you could get that would be from an HDR image. If you look at his Pinterest site, if we just scroll down here, you can see the different images which has been created. Now, this is a photograph taken by RC Concepcion, and you'll see his website is called About RC. And really, to a degree, HDR doesn't really work for portrait work. It works great for architecture work and scenic views, but not really for portrait work. Now, I wouldn't actually call this a portrait, even though there is an individual playing the glasses here. But you can see how HDR has really worked for this particular image which RC has created. Beautiful golden colors here of the light through the glass and the water, and he's managed to get from the HDR detail of the face and the hand and the background, and it is a great example, one of the very few that would work in what would possibly be termed as a portrait situation. This image, he told me when I interviewed him, it took him a long time to get ready for this shot because he was waiting for the traffic to move in front. And a great HDR image here of the building with the neon lights up the side. Another image by RC of a balcony of where he was staying, but you see that he's managed to get the buildings in the background. Now, you imagine yourself, if you're exposing this image to get the balcony, there's just no way that you would get the exposure for the mountains in the background. Likewise, if you've exposed for the mountains, this would be totally blown out. So this is where HDR can help create an image by the high dynamic range of the image which is there in your raw files. It's another shot by RC, taken from the buildings in New York. Again, showing the lights and then showing the sky. And as I've just said to you, exposing for the lights, this would all be black. Exposed for the sky, this would all be blown out. So he's got a good balance there of work created using the HDR program. And this is an image by Trey Ratcliff using the HDR process with his work. And there really is some amazing work which can be created, and it's subtle work. It's not harsh. It's photography with art, in my opinion, art photography, and creating using this program of HDR. I think there's one more image. No, there's not. That's it. So we'll come out of that. Let's just go very quickly to 500px. I like to check 500px because you'll see a diversity of images here created. You'll see some HDR being created with mono. HDR is a big popular program for people that love to take build inside buildings which have seen better days. And you can see here, the sand dunes in one particular building here, peeling paint on another. And let's just look at this one, for instance, as an example. And using HDR has been able, the photographer Marcos Toranzo has been able to enhance these particular points in the room, which with a normal photograph taken, he would have struggled to have got that sort of detail. Let's moving on inside a chapel here. All these darker areas of rooms would have been hidden if you're exposing for the lighter areas, and vice versa. You expose for the shadow, the highlights blow out. So it's giving you almost a balanced view of an image, but bringing some artistry, let's be honest, with ourselves into the image. And as I say, it is a favorite of people that like to go into old buildings that have seen better days. A great image example here of a mono image using HDR. And then one more hallway there, and another decrepit staircase. And there is the example. If you had exposed for this area here, the lower third, this window would have been totally blown out. So HDR has given the opportunity for the photographer to create that scene. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up Lightroom. Let me just get the screen share up. Now, the screen may go a little bit funny for a little while, folks, but do not worry. Here we go. So that seems to be working. So this is an image which I took in the Norwegian fields. We got up to the Norwegian fields for 5 days, and it poured with rain every single day. But we got this fantastic misty look to all our images. So there's a couple of things which I need to correct here. First of all, I need to correct that horizon. And the only way for me to correct that horizon, in my opinion, is to go by these buildings here and take a line there. I'm using the cropping tool, and that basically straightens up the building. I'm not worried about this coastal part here at an angle, because that's unfortunately was the angle that the ship was docked. I'm also going to just crop in a little bit on the left hand side, bring it up and just expand out on the right, and that's giving me the a level image and cropped nicely. So first things I want to do, I want to see if I can get a little bit more out of this sky region up the top here. Just going to add some contrast and just warm up that sky just a little bit and click done. So there we go. That's basically my first start, and I'm happy with that start. Now, when the point was with this, I could then basically do one thing. There's two ways which I would go about this. With this particular one, I'm going to drop the highlights right down to -100, and I'm going to increase the shadows by 100, just balancing it out a little bit. If you hold down the Alt key on a Mac keyboard and touch the whites here, you can just slide the whites across a little bit, but you don't want to take it too far because you'll blow the whites out in an image. You've got to check it on the left hand side if there's no white spots showing in the black screen. You release that and then hit the Alt key again and take the blacks and just take it down until you see some black areas showing, which is that coastal part of the port. Now immediately we can see that we're starting to build up an HDR effect here. We've got a good balance of color. It's a little bit on the rich side maybe for some people's preferences, but in Norway green is very, very green, and we've got some good red colors here. Now we can go a little bit further with this image. We can add the clarity, and you can see what clarity does. It adds sharpness, a little bit of sharpness, but it mainly offers up a fair bit of contrast to the image, and we don't want too much of that in this particular image. So I'm just going to tag that down a little bit. Vibrance, and the only way to work these out is to take the slider either way. So we take the vibrance down, we just, does obviously what it says on the tin. It reduces the vibrancy of the colors in the scene. Or we can take it the other way, and this is when we're starting to look at everything and thinking, wow, we're really starting to get into some HDR type effect work here. And remember, this is with just one single image in Lightroom. This is not with a sandwiched image of 3 or 4 or 5 images. And I'm quite happy with that there, where that is. Now, saturation is the area where people go berserk. Fully saturated, it doesn't look real, does it? Let's be honest. And totally unsaturated is a mono image. So I just want to saturate the colors just a wee bit, just a tad, not a great deal, just to import that image there. Finally, just to balance up everything, I would like to take up the lower part of the image. This is too bright down at the bottom for my liking, so I'm going to reduce the exposure there, add a little bit of contrast. What happens if I increase things? Yeah, increase the shadows a little bit and take down the highlights. And then if we want to mirror what we're seeing up here in terms of a yellow form of the sky, then we can add a little bit of yellow into the image at the bottom, just to show a reflection of what we're getting in the top. And that's very basically what I would look at doing with regards to a creating an HDR look from one single image. It's not to everyone's personal taste. Some would say it's probably overdone, even that as we look at that, but I'm quite happy with that for my own personal interest. Sharpening is where you've got to be very careful. You can add a little bit of sharpness to it, and then you add your luminance to balance. Now, normally that figure 60 and 27, you don't want that to be over 100. And I find normally with Lightroom 5C to leave that around about 49, and I'm happy with luminance, which basically smooths out the noise of your image just around about 20. I'm happy with that sort of thing. One of the sliders here, which I find very, very useful, if you hit the Alt key and hit the masking slider, the screen goes completely blank. And what in actual fact does, it instructs the Lightroom to add sharpening to the lighter areas. So all the black areas, the sharpening's not touched. And I find sometimes it just gives the image just a little pop. Next, we go down lens correction. We must do this. Enable profile corrections. This is in the profile of the 4 options here. Click enable profile. You're then given an option to select the camera that you're using, which in my case was a Fujifilm. This automatically defaults to an X100. That's fine. But you will get models come up in here if you're using Canon or Nikon or Sony. And then my favorite, as you know, I just bring the vignette in subtly to darken down the corners a little bit. I can adjust the grain there. There's no point in this particular image. I don't want to do that. And I'm happy with that result there. Okay. So that basically is how I would go about making an HDR image from just one image. Now, there is another cheat. You can actual fact copy those images, that one image, and you can physically underexpose. Say you want to say, let's say from say you do 3. So you copy it twice, and you leave one in the center at 0 on the exposure. The one on the left you put to -1, and the one on the right you put to +1. And then those 3 images are then taken and put into your preferred HDR program. That saves you in actual fact doing the bracketing performance when you make your photograph at the initial stage. I think I better at that point, I'm not going to go into more detail as regards to how to edit that. But what I'd like to do is just explain to you with regards to bracketing. And bracketing is available to all cameras, maybe say from the tiny compacts, but I'm assuming a lot of you have got a form of DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera, a compact system camera. And you will find in your menu there a bracketing option. And in that bracketing option, you may be able to select 3 or maybe 5 images that will be taken for you. Then you in actual fact select what exposure difference you want between each one. Now, back in the day when it first came about, guys would actual fact go by 3rd exposure, 30 V stops. So they'd start off at say -1 1/3, then they go to -2/3, and then to 0, then to +2/3, and then to +1 1/3. But nowadays, with the way these programs work so well, you in actual fact can do it by just one stop. So you take 3 images, -1, 0, and +1. Set your bracketing for that. Take your image, and then take the camera back in and into the files into Lightroom, and then work on from there. Remembering 3 images would then have to be posted into your HDR program of your choice. I'm not going to suggest which program to use really for you. It's one for you to work out and enjoy yourself, to test out. It just happens from my aspect, I prefer to use HDR effects, which is part of the Nikon, the Nik collection. It's not Nikon, nothing to do with them. It's good to experiment and play around with the sliders. I'm going to do that the next time round. I didn't want to give you too much. And one thing about my workshops is I don't want to give you too much detail for you to get lost and to get effectively, I don't want you to get bored with the presentation. I want it to be nice and short and clipped for you to get the basics of it and then go out and experiment and have a go for yourself. So let's do a little thing for the flicker. Let's have a crack at doing an HDR image, and you make your choice how you want to do it. If you want to have a crack at getting into one of these programs, then please do so. But remember, you're going to have to put in 3 different images of different exposures, and I would suggest that is done using a tripod. Make those images with a tripod, then you know that everything is lined up. If you are just out and about and you're handheld and you're taking a shot and you think, well, that may quite work in HDR, then take my example of copying that image twice in Lightroom. That gives you 3 images, and then adjust your exposure for -1 and another image for +1, and you've got your 3 separate images. Then you can take them into the HDR program, or do what I've just done there, 1 single image, and use Lightroom, which is quite a powerful unit nowadays, to make the adjustments and to create an HDR-esque style to your image. So it's not an assignment this week. It's just going to be 2 images that you can post up. Have a crack at doing some HDR. If you don't want to, don't worry, do something else. But it would be nice to see if some of you guys want to have a little crack at doing some HDR work. HDR is not for everybody. I think it's a sort of a work which has improved with time. I think in actual fact, when HDR first appeared on the scene, I think it was a little bit like when color first appeared on the scene, when everyone was taking mono and everyone was saying, no, the photograph is mono. It gives the viewer the chance to view and express and think about what was there and what was going on. And they were very, very anti-color when it first arrived, like they were very, very anti-35mm film when it first arrived on the scene. HDR really shook up the world, so to speak, to coin a phrase, when these programs and the algorithms were allowed to perform and create such fantastic images, which can be created using the HDR process by allowing the photographer, the artist, to make the adjustments in his editing process to effectively balance out the image. The camera can only do so much. It's got to expose for light, or it's got to expose for shadow. And there is a balance there, but in the end, the HDR will enhance that balance better than you will ever be able to do straight out of camera. Lightroom has come on leaps and bounds since it first hit the scene. And just by playing around with the sliders, excuse me, knocking down the highlights, increasing the shadows, will immediately give you an HDR-esque effect. So I hope you've enjoyed this workshop. It's been great. I'm really looking forward to viewing it myself to make sure that demo went through okay. If it did, I'll be doing more demonstrations of Lightroom and editing via using Safari rather than Chrome, because for some reason Chrome doesn't show you the windows either side for the library and for the developing tools. So I'm hoping that it has worked. Please make some comments in the discussions on the Flickr, or post me on the Photography Live and Uncut page on Facebook. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll think of a topic next week. Look out those 2 books, by the way. Trey Ratcliff's book. It's an old book, but it really is a fantastic book to purchase. And look out, obviously, R.C. Concepcion's book, which is available either as an iPad download, or you can buy the print version. And I know you can get that via his website, or it'll direct you to a particular site to purchase it. So again, I hope you've enjoyed this workshop, and I'll see you next week. Cheers then. Bye for now.